Our theory, one of our theories on the origins of prophecy in Israel, right? The theory is on the uniqueness of prophecy in Israel, that it wasn't borrowed, that it was peculiar or unique to Israel. In the last lessons, we touched on the traditional theory, right? And also the chaotic origins theory. And those theories, we also criticize them, but ultimately, we managed to discover that they are there to explain that prophecy was what? Prophecy was unique to Israel. So today, we are going to round up with a couple of theories. I think there are about 3 or 4 of them left, but some of them are the most important. We are going to start with the evolutionary theory. Right. We are going to start with the what? Evolutionary theory. Right. So this theory is based on 1 Samuel 9 verse what? 9. That's where we derive it from. I think we once mentioned about it, that the office of a seer is now the office of a what? Of a prophet. Let me explain. So this theory is based on 1 Samuel 9 verse 9, which says that, I would read, I quote, "Formerly in Israel, if a man would want to inquire of God, he would say, 'Come, let us go to the seer.' For he who is now called a prophet was formerly called a what? A seer." What this verse simply means is that the office of the prophet evolved from that of a what? Of a seer. Thus prophecy originated in Israel there. It started as seership, then the one who was formerly a seer is now a what? A prophet. Thank you very much. That's why it's called the what? The evolutionary. It's from the word what? Evolution. So there was an evolution which happened, or sort of a revolution, or sort of a change from seership to prophethood. Let me explain again. However, what is problematic is that the proponents of the theory did not spell out the reason why there was this evolutionary development. That's what we want to establish. They just said, oh no, the office of a, according to 1 Samuel 9 verse 9, like the verse that I read, the office of a seer graduated into that of a prophet. But they didn't really explain in detail why it graduated like that, right? So they left that to guessing. And scholars did. Scholars think that the office of a prophet evolved from that of a seer because of the fact that the office of a seer was no longer satisfying the needs of common members of the society. I think I once explained that. That's another explanation. Because the seership was only limited to what? To seeing. The reason why it graduated into prophecy is because prophecy is wide. You will find out that as we'll be going forward with this topic and we'll be touching on each and every prophet in detail, prophets were now engaging in some social issues. Prophets were now engaging in some political and economic issues. And that's another explanation of the theory that we are going to look at, the political theory. That the prophets was unique to Israel because of the politics of the day. The people, the common people which have just been mentioned by this statement, right, needed leaders. Right. This means that the prophet had to go into the prophetic office, to instigate that. And I think I explained it last time, that the first Israelite prophets were anointed by the what? The first Israelite kings were anointed by the prophet called what? Called Samuel. Which means the prophets now had that political job of anointing kings. Yes. That's what is being said. So they are saying the office of a seer was too limited. It didn't have much flexibility to do some roles. So it had to move to that of a what? Of a prophet. Because a prophet has many roles that he covers. Am I making sense? Thank you. Right. So the office was now corrupt. The seership office, it was now corrupt and institutionalized to the extent that the people were no longer catered for. I think during the time of Samuel lived with Eli. Eli was a what? Was a priest. And Eli had 2 sons in the names of Hophni and what? Hophni and what? Phinehas. They they worked with their father at the cultic places, and they used to steal some sacrificial pieces, you know. So this meant that the office of a seer was now highly corrupt. The office of a seer was now highly corrupt. So they needed a prophet to deal with that. That's why Yahweh had to call Samuel. Right. So because of this reason, they were no longer carrying out their duties independently, as they felt that criticizing those ruling elite was like binding the heads that feed them. So it is in this respect that the office of the prophet originated. The office of the prophet originated so that it would give checks and balances to the what? To the monarchy. The other sign which shows that the cult or the priesthood was now corrupt, it is simply because it was now being controlled by the ruling class. Are you getting the sense? So now the priests were now engaged in soothsaying. They were like doing things which the kings wanted because they needed the money, right? So they finally the people had to complain and say, no, this office of a seer is now very corrupt. Yes, because under corruption, the one with money is the one who benefits. What am I saying? If you like commit a traffic offense and the police at the roadblock not notice that, you can just give them the money, then you leave. Why did they let you leave? And why did you even leave yourself? It is because you have the money. So when money is being used unjustly, right? That's corruption too. Are you getting the sense? Yes. When people like are not deserving of what they will be facing, then they use money to bypass those issues, right? They become corrupt. So the elite members of the society were now engaged in corruption with the what? With the seers and the cultic leaders, right? So Yahweh had to create or come up with the office of the prophet to offer checks and balance to the what? To the kings. That's why you find out that the kings that came later on were so fearless. They could face the what? The kings. The prophets that came later on, yes, sorry for the slip of the tongue. The prophets that came later on, they had that authority and power to challenge the what? The kings. That's what is being said. So we can derive from this that is prophecy originated from what? From Samuel. Because Samuel is the one who stands between the seership and the prophecy, right? Again, this evolutionary theory also means that Samuel also stands between the bridge between theocracy and what? And monarchy. Mabise, what did I say theocracy was? Before we say crassy means rule. Theo means God, right? Theocracy means the Israelites were under what? God. Right? Then they cried for a king, so it moved from what? From a monarchy. So Samuel is very important in that evolutionary theory because he was the one who anointed the first kings of what? Of Israel. This means he stands in between, he was the bridge between theocracy and monarchy. The transition between theocracy and monarchy was instigated by what? By Samuel. He took an alabaster of oil and anointed Saul and also anointed David after what? After Saul. That's what also substantiates the what? The evolutionary theory. But however, we are lawyers to be, we don't just regurgitate any information we see, we also apply our own minds. Let us criticize this evolutionary theory. The first criticism of the theory, as indicated earlier, is that the proponents of this theory do not give the reasons for evolutionary development. And secondly, one may not be wrong to say that there is no clear distinction between a prophet and a seer, as the proponents of the theory would want us to believe. That's what they say. So some are saying no. The office of a seer and a prophet does not have the what? Does not even have a distinct difference. We want to water down the evolutionary theory thereof. So God, who came after Samuel, was referred to both as both David's prophet and what? And seer, like God the prophet. Right? Okay, pause. God was referred to as God the what? The seer. He came after what? After Samuel later on. But Samuel is the one who anointed David. Then God, the seer, he was also referred to as a prophet. So that's the argument here, that there are certain nuances, or there isn't really a separation, or there is a tissue thin line, or there is a fuzzy line separating prophecy and seership. That's the argument. So the reason for taking this position being that there are other true prophets who preceded Samuel. Good examples being Moses and Abraham, because according to the evolutionary theory, right, the first prophet in Israel was what? Was Samuel. But now we are dismissing that and saying, no, it's not Samuel only. There were some prophets who came up before what? Yes. There are some prophets who preceded Samuel. For example, Moses and what? And Abraham. So this shows that prophecy did not start during the time of what? Yes. So let us look at the political origins of prophecy. Right. Let us look at the political origins of prophecy. Another theory. Right. This is another theory that tries to trace the origins of prophecy within Israel. So we have scholars that, like, there's Gottwald, Mendenhall, right? There's Gottwald and Mendenhall, Max Weber and B.W. Anderson. I think I gave you B.W. Anderson. They are proponents of this theory. And they say that according to this school of thought, prophecy originated during the early settlements in what? In Canaan. I think we explained it later on. And I think again in the B.W. Anderson text, there's a map of the ancient Near East. The Israelites migrated from Egypt to what? To Canaan. So when they arrived to Canaan, there was the ancient Near East. In simple English, those countries which were surrounding what? They are Canaan. Those countries already had the kingdom systems or the monarchical systems, which the Israelites had to follow in order to live harmoniously with those people. So they are now saying, no, prophecy started because of that. Because the duty of the prophets thereof was there to reprimand and to offer checks and balances to the offices of the what? Of the king. So you cannot offer checks and balances to what is not there. So the establishment of a monarchy, the establishment of a kingdom, the establishment of a kingship also goes hand in glove or hand in hand with the starting of what? Of prophecy. Because the prophets were now there to what? To control the kingship. That's what they are trying to say here. So the argument of these scholars is that the Hebrews are identified with the Habirus or Habirus, who were a group of declassed people. These people, according to Mendenhall, withdrew from the obligations that the society had given them. They took advantage of their seasonal movements as nomads to organize themselves into a formidable army. And the reason for forming this political organization was to aggressively fight feudalism, which had resulted to classes in the society, right? So the feudalism had been bought by what? By Baalism. I think we will touch into Baalism later on when we will be studying Elijah. Because at that time, there was a king called Ahab, and he married Jezebel. Jezebel was not an Israelite, right? She took him with idols, the Baal prophecy, Baal prophets, Baal prophecy, in Israel. That was sort of the explanation that is being put across here, So for them to fight successfully, they needed a religion that would legitimize their cause. It is believed that by the above mentioned scholars that it was during this period that Yahwehism arose. It arose because the Israelites did not want to be bullied. Yes. They were being attacked by systems with the kingships, with the feudalism and stuff, so they also have to start systems to fight those systems, So Yahweh was seen as a God who was against social exploitation. So Yahwehism was a challenge to the basic ideology of Baalism, which had given rise to what? To feudalism. So according to this theory, prophecy arose so that it could legitimize the struggle of the Habirus. Therefore, prophecy originated in Israel. It is called the political origins of what? Of prophecy. Right? Yes, they had to instigate or initiate political system because they were living around people who already had established political systems. Yes. So for them to fight with them, they must sort of have the same amount of ammunition. which is political structures. Right. So it can be criticized, like this theory has been bombarded with criticism. The first being that the Hebrews are not easily identified with the Apirus. In other words, the Hebrews and the Apirus are two different what? Peoples. Because the people who come up with this argument, they say, of course, the Hebrews, right? The Israelites, right? Then they like compare them with what they call the Apirus. So we are now watering it down by saying these are two different what? Systems, something like that. You know. So secondly, it is difficult for us to trace the origins of prophecy during the early settlement in Canaan. Lastly, the prevalent religious figures during the early settlement in Canaan are priests, not what? Prophets. These are. And prophets came at a what? At a later stage. Yes. Right. Because the office of a prophet did not just appear after they had just landed in Canaan. No. It developed what? Later on. That's why you find out that they believed in seers first. Then later on, they believed in what? Prophets after settlement. Right. So this one is a link with what? The monarchical origins of prophecy again. Right? So there are some scholars like E.M. Cross who think that prophecy originated with the rise of the what? Of the monarch. I think I want to explain it. So there is also sort of a marriage of convenience between the evolutionary theory, the political theory, and also the monarchical origins theory. What this therefore means is that prophecy originated during the time of what? Of Samuel. Because it is during this time we see people asking for a king to what? To govern them. That's when the people ask it, and I would like to repeat again that Samuel was the one who anointed what? The first kings in the names of Saul and what? And Samuel. Thus, prophecy originated in what? In Israel thereof. So the reason why prophets arose was to put checks and balances to the administration of the monarchy, and this would explain why prophets were heavily criticized kings if they did something wrong. I think you know, Isaiah advising King Ahaz. We also have like Elijah reprimanding Ahab. We also have Nathan reprimanding David. So these prophets were doing sort of a political role in which they were acting as the advisors of the king, right? Yes. If you've gone into the presidium, like even our own President Didi also has some advisors, you know that. Yes. Yes. That's politics, that's political. Right. So we also see prophets actively participating in the day-to-day activity of kings. A good example was that of Nathan, who was a court prophet of David, and Isaiah, who advised us during the issue of the Syro-Ephraimitic alliance. So this theory, again, we can criticize it along two lines as we try to round up. Like, firstly, the theory wants us to believe that a prophecy originated during the time of Samuel, when we see the first king of Israel being crowned. But this is not correct. There are other prophets like Moses and Abraham who came before what? Samuel. Because the issue here is about the prophets. Who is a prophet? Who started prophecy? So here we're now saying, if we say the office of a prophet started because of Samuel, who did the prophetic role, which was political, to anoint the first kings, Saul and David, we also have prophets who preceded him, right? In the names of Abraham and what? And Moses. That's an argument to water down it. So secondly, this theory reduces the office of a prophet into that of a politician. Right? Yes. They are trying to say what? The office of a prophet is mainly that of a politician. But prophets also did what? It's not really mentioned in these notes, but there is also what they call the what? You do sociology. There is also the sociological what? Theory. It states that prophecy arose because of the social problems that the people were facing. So the prophets are now coming through as champions of social justice. They criticize the social injustice in the society. For example, Moses. The reason why he freed the Israelites is because they were being abused by Pharaoh in Egypt. Right? For example, Elijah, when he stood for Naboth on the issue of Naboth's vineyard, yes, he was trying to correct the social injustice that was bedeviling Israel at that time. Another example is Amos. Amos attacked the rulers and the rich people and the cows of Bashan. If you read Amos chapter 3 and 4, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was reprimanding all those people as a champion of social justice. He was standing for those who are being abused in the society. So that's why we are saying, no, this monarchical theory is not, is just like limiting the prophets as political figures. Right? It's not looking at the economic and social roles which the prophets also played. I get the sense. It's a matter of looking into everything, you know. Yes. So that's it for today. You can cut with it.